Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So I did a Linnea Sinclair book a while back, however long back it was. And that was Accidental Goddess, which is about a woman with superpowers who falls in love with a relatively ordinary guy, and there's an alien invasion, and they stop it using her superpowers. This is a book about a guy with superpowers who falls in love with a relatively ordinary woman, and then there's an alien invasion, and they use his superpowers to stop the alien invasion. This goes along with other books, like Gabriel's Ghost, which is about a guy with superpowers who falls in love with a relatively ordinary woman, and there's an alien invasion, and they stop it with his superpowers. Or The Down Home Zombie Blues, which, despite its great title, is about a woman with superpowers who falls in love with a relatively ordinary guy, and then there's an alien invasion and they stop it with her superpowers. You may notice my opinion of Linnea Sinclair coming out in this. I enjoy her books, but I enjoy her books in the same way that you enjoy a Harlequin romance or one of those dreadful Christmas movies that my mother watches every Christmas. You can see the end coming. You know exactly how it goes beat for beat. And the fun is basically in the getting there. Finders Keepers also is a story of a not American woman and a not Russian man. And I say this because Kairis Vanor is, Rhys Vanor, who later turns out to be, who does later turn out to be, the Captain Tivar of I don't remember the name of his ship offhand. The thing is that every bit of pseudo language that they come up with, every bit that the Empire, every bit of this that the Empire comes out with, every thing that we hear, it all sounds like it's intended to be Russian. This is a book that I think is born of someone who is a child of the Cold War period. There's a lot in here that feels, it feels very America versus Russia. And I mean, that could just be my own bias, my own having grown up with Star Trek, where, you know, the bad guys in the original series were all the Russians. But that's, the Empire, the Zafharan Empire, everything about it just, it feels like something that was inspired by communist Russia. The attitudes of the people, the attitudes of the military, whereas the Conclave has that greatly disorganized feeling that you get out of the American side of things in works of fiction. So, in this book, our female lead, whose name is Trilby is a small freighter captain who winds up stumbling across this Imperial officer, and we find out over the course of this that her ship has information that the third-party evil invading aliens really, really want, because they can use it to sneak around and invade and conquer everybody. Now, this is the cover of the book, of the copy that I currently own of this book. The copy that I first read, which I found on one of those shelves in the library where they have all of the really cheap paperbacks, that cover was this cover. the tacky, much more romance novel-y cover of a woman with a very large gun aimed at a guy who's got his hands in the air. Which, this is a tackier cover, but I feel like it fits how the book goes and how the book feels a lot better, because that first cover that everybody saw, it implies a sort of a weird spirituality fuzziness that I think doesn't really work, whereas this cover I think works a lot better because you have the dingy freighter in the background, you have the woman with a gun because, you know, there's a lot of holding guns on people in this book. When he first wakes up on her ship because she found him basically unconscious and took him on board her ship before he got eaten by snakes. And he wakes up and holds her at gunpoint. And there's a lot of talk about sexual attraction because this is, despite its trappings, a romance novel. It is fundamentally a story about two people who are extremely attracted to each other, have a few misunderstandings, and eventually get over them to, you know, say incredibly mushy things to each other. Which, of course, speaks to my taste in romance novels. It's not that I never read romance novels, it's just that I find that a romance novel where nothing else is happening in it leaves me going... It leaves me always asking the question of, when is the story going to start? And when it turns out that the story was, will they, won't they, will they, oh they will, look at them, and they've fallen into bed together, yay. I find myself saying, that was it? That was the whole story? You kept me waiting for a story for 200 pages for that to turn out to be the story? Why did we bother with this? And so, there's a lot in this book that is about the concern about the aliens invading. It's about the politics of the Empire. And there's also a very, very interesting side issue with Trilby, who, among other things, she's just gotten relatively recently, when this book starts, off of a relationship with a very, very rich guy. He's the son of a family that's very, very wealthy. It's kind of like she was in a relationship with one of the Kennedys. Except, of course, she's a freighter pilot. She runs a ship that is just barely this side of legal. She has no money. So the fact that she was in a relationship with this guy is a little bit weird. And when she first meets our romantic male lead rather, he tells her he's just a lieutenant on the Rusalka. Well, it turns out that he's not just a lieutenant, he is the Captain Kairis Tivar. And at a point in this book, she explains to us that after Jagan, she had declared to herself that she was never ever going to date anybody ever again who had a "the" in his name. And, you know, like the Jagan Grantforth of the Grantforths, or in this case, after she falls in love with him, the Captain Tivar of the Rusalka. And there's sort of a very interesting... There's an interesting thing that this book winds up going into about that feeling of inadequacy that she has because she's a foundling. She doesn't have a family. She was just found, and her name, Trilby, she was just named after the fact that she had a blanket wrapped around her from Trilbium looms. They named her after a blanket. And so there is an interesting discussion and interesting going into in this book about inadequacy, about the way that the way that background can make somebody feel like they are not deserving of regard or of a relationship with a so-called better class of person, which is interestingly paralleled because Kairos Tivar is actually a cyborg. I mean, he's not described that way in the book. But he is described in the book as having been grown and as having large amounts of metal stuff in his chest that helps hold him together, and that's where his superpowers that save the day come from. I do like this book because, I mean, she falls into that feisty female character that we're all so tired of. The ones where they try to pass them off as feisty and hardworking and will, do exciting stuff. And a lot of them, they do one thing and then they never do it again. To an extent, she is that. To an extent, she's that one-note feisty character. But the first time that she does a thing, she's the one who gets them out of a tight spot when they're being chased by the evil invading aliens. And the second time, while her participation is not necessary for them to save the day, she does actually play a real role in it, and it's refreshing to see this character move into actually doing something, because it is a danger for this kind of character. Far too often you see them and they get bailed out and rescued at the end, and you say to yourself, okay, so she's got all of this training and whatnot, and doesn't actually do anything. Trilby does stuff. It's just she doesn't do as much as she could, and it can be a little disappointing, and it's a little difficult. There's a bit of a weird line here, because on the one hand, I understand the need to have a character have flaws. As a great fanfic once said, being kidnapped by pirates is not a flaw. But, and if you haven't read any of those University of Fanfiction fanfics, those are those can be really, really good. Some of them are awful, but a lot of them are pretty darn good. Anyways, you want to walk that line between a original character Mary Sue sort of thing and having somebody who is genuinely strong and genuinely does stuff. I don't think this book succeeds. I don't think it's as good as most of the people who write rave reviews about it on the internet and other reviews say, but it's fun. It's frequently silly. I really, really like her robot Desi, who owes a lot to C-3PO. And I do like the interaction between her and Kairos. It's not too uneven. It's a difficult call on this book because I really, really like it, but it's the same book that Linnea Sinclair has written 3 times before and 4 times after. And so, I do like it. But, with Linnea Sinclair, it's almost like finding which of the same book written over and over again is your favorite of the same book written over and over again. I don't think I have a lot else to say on this, so that's everything, and I will see you all next week.